You're listening to Sweet Talk, all things maple.
We have a brief announcement about an upcoming episode. Do you have a question for a maple specialist? We are currently soliciting questions to be answered right here on the show. To submit your question, visit www.cornellmaple.com and click on Sweet Talk at the top of the page. Or, if you are using the Spotify mobile app to listen to this episode, simply scroll down to submit your question directly on the app. We look forward to answering your maple questions. Welcome to Sweet Talk, all things maple. I'm Aaron Whiteman, co-director of the Cornell Maple Program. Joining me from the frozen north, where the weather is 10 months of winter, followed by 2 months of bad sledding, is my colleague, the director of the Eline Maple Research Forest in Lake Placid, Adam Wild. Hi, Adam.
Hi, Aaron. I know you like to make fun of the weather up here in the Adirondacks. It is true. You're just not tough enough for it, I guess. But the weather is colder here, but it is definitely a beautiful area being up here in the mountains. One thing our listeners may not realize, though, is that we share leadership of the Cornell Maple Program, but our offices are almost 300 miles apart.
That's right. That definitely cuts down on our chit-chat around the water cooler, right? But it also highlights what a big state New York is. It's not only big in terms of area, with about 300 million tappable maple trees, by the way, but it's also big in population with over 19 million people.
Yeah, which is actually more people than all of the New England states combined, which is about 15 million. And that large population in New York, that includes New York City, which is the home of Wall Street and a big hub of global economic activity.
Yeah, we can't forget about the Big Apple, which often overshadows the rest of the state. But one of the upsides of living in a big state is the abundance of resources that have been created to help businesses.
And New York State has invested in a wide variety of programs to help grow small businesses, including farms, but also food and beverage companies. And many of those programs are run by Cornell University in Ithaca and at Cornell AgriTech in Geneva, New York.
Today, we're going to focus on one of these programs, the Cornell Center of Excellence for Food and Agriculture. This center connects entrepreneurs with business solutions to help launch new businesses and support the growth of existing companies.
That includes a lot of resources such as, business mentorship, incubators and accelerators, but also business-to-business partnerships, supply chain asset resources, and product development.
We're joined today by Derek Simmonds, who serves as a business development specialist at the Center of Excellence, to talk about developing new food products.
Great. Let's listen.
Today, our guest is Derek Simmonds from the Cornell Center of Excellence for Food and Agriculture. Hello, Derek, and welcome to Sweet Talk.
Hi, Aaron. Thanks.
I'm glad you could join us today. And can you start by introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about your role at the center?
Sure. I'm a business development specialist here at the New York State Center of Excellence for Food and Agriculture at Cornell AgriTech. It's a very long name.
Yeah, that's a long title.
It is. And I went to ESF. So I have a degree in biology and a master's degree in natural resources management from SUNY ESF. So as a business development specialist here at the Center of Excellence, I work with a lot of food products and agriculture technology companies to help them to get started and grow in New York State. Our program is funded by New York State, so we work primarily with companies in New York State or companies that are intending to move to New York State.
What does the rest of the team look like there?
So we have 3 business development specialists. The other 2 have more in-depth background in food processing. I tend to work with more of the agriculture companies and a lot of the startups, because I also worked in economic development for a few years, and I worked for Cornell Cooperative Extension for 7 or 8 years. We also have a few other staff. We have a media person, and our executive director, or our director is Kathy Young.
And you're nested within several other organizations sort of within AgriTech, right? So there's the Food Venture Center and those other organizations. How does the Center of Excellence fit within those?
So we are located in the building. We're in the Food Research Lab here in Geneva at AgriTech. Also in this building is the Food Venture Center and the pilot plant. The Food Venture Center also operates the pilot plant, and they do a lot of food safety type stuff. They run food safety classes, and they do scheduled processes for companies that want to start producing food products for sale. And the pilot plant it's a manufacturing facility that has the smallest version you can get of all these different types of food manufacturing equipment. So it's a really good way to transition from making something in your kitchen or at a commercial kitchen and transitioning into a manufacturing facility, because you can set up a line like it would be in a large scale manufacturing plant, but it's much cheaper to run it in our plant because you have very small pieces of equipment. So you can set up a line just like you would in a full scale facility, and you can test your product to make sure it comes out how you want it to come out. Because as you're scaling up to that level, a lot of things have to change. And so you have to not necessarily change your product completely, but there are some adjustments you have to make as you scale up. So this makes sure that those adjustments turn out well and the product is acceptable in the end. And it's much cheaper than running it a full manufacturing line to do those tests.
You said the smallest equipment that you can get, but that you're talking about smallest industrial scale equipment, right?
Yes, smallest, yeah. So bigger than your kitchen, yeah.
So a small industrial microwave is still like the size of a Volkswagen bus, right?
Yeah, it's still big, yeah.
Sounds like some really tremendous resources all around you. And I wanted to talk about new product development today, but first, I understand that you've dabbled a little bit in maple production yourself.
Yeah, a little bit. I've done backyard scale maple sugaring.
How many trees did you tap?
Well, when I first did it, I was doing it myself, and it was probably 5 or 6 taps, so not very much. Then a few years after that, my father was living in a forest, so we started doing more like 20 trees. And we had a small scale evaporator. And after a couple of years, he had a reverse osmosis machine.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. But we haven't done it in a few years now. He moved.
Oh,
he moved
that's
to
too
Florida.
bad.
Yeah, he retired and moved to Florida. So.
Well, the fact that you've done it on any scale automatically boosts your credibility among our maple producing listeners quite a lot. So glad to hear that. But now talking about new product development, can we zoom out first and kind of look from the macro view of the stages of launching a new product? What's the first step in the process?
Yeah, well, I think the first step would be to have a product idea. And I'll go through a couple different steps, and these aren't necessarily in any kind of order. Some of these steps you will do at the same time, or you can do them in different orders. So the second step would be to develop a prototype and to do what we call customer discovery, which is where you talk to people who would be your potential customers to figure out, first of all, who are those potential customers, and then what kinds of things do they want? What are they interested in? And how much are they willing to pay? And so you can develop an idea from the customer discovery, and your idea will evolve with the customer discovery. And then you develop a prototype, say, this is my product. And maybe you, as part of customer discovery, you have some people taste that product and they give you some comments on it, and you might adjust it further. Eventually, you should write some sort of a business plan, and that doesn't have to be very extensive. You should write a description of what you want to do. Eventually, you'll include a marketing plan and a market analysis. Who else is out there? What are they selling? How much are they selling it for? And who are their customers? And how are you going to compete with them? What's your competitive advantage? And you should also include financials in that business plan. And I know it's hard to know how much things are going to cost before you actually get started, but you should guess. You can make an educated guess on those things. So you should have an idea of how much things are going to cost you and how much you're going to have to charge before you really get into it. That's pretty important.
One thing that surprises me about what you said, but that makes sense, is that you don't even have to have a product concept. So if I game that out a little bit, hypothetically, I could say, I want to start a business where I make some sort of maple snack food. Like I could start with that as kind of a generic concept, right? And then build from there.
Oh, yeah, certainly. Through your customer discovery process, you will be able to refine that idea and come up with something that makes sense for your customers and for you.
Well, that's really interesting. So thinking about these first steps, so you've outlined product concept, market discovery, and beginning to build a business plan and starting to fill in some of those numbers. Now, if we're thinking more specifically for food and beverage businesses, are there special considerations for that process because there's food safety issues and things like that? Is that something that should be thought about at the beginning?
Oh, yeah, certainly. Especially, once you have a prototype, then you really have to start thinking about that. So if food safety is on the top of the list there, to be able to sell your product, you need a scheduled process, and you probably will need a 20C food processing license. So there are other pathways you can take, but those are some things that you should be thinking about. The scheduled process is something the Food Venture Center can do. You can look at their website, and I recommend that you reach out to us, the COE. We can help guide you through the whole process. really from starting with your idea up to getting your idea on the shelf. Other things that you'll have to think about for a food and beverage business is, well, and you would think about this for any business, but your business model. Who are you going to sell to? How are you going to get your item to the final consumer? Are you going to sell through farmers markets or a farm stand? Are you going to do online retail? Are you going to get a distributor, or are you going to self-distribute to stores? Those are some questions you'll have to answer as you move forward in your development of your business.
Yeah, and I guess not all food products are equal in terms of profit margin and things like that. So something like a beverage, you might be looking at high volume and distributorships in order to reach your revenue targets, whereas with smaller, more gourmet specialty items, you're looking at maybe a smaller volume.
Yeah, there's a full range. There's a lot of different ways you could go with that. Yeah.
So maybe that's a consideration at the beginning of the process too, is what bucket your product fits into in terms of like what scale you're going to have to manufacture at to be profitable and things like that.
Yeah, and that will also answer the question, are you going to produce this yourself at a really like a kitchen scale level? Are you going to get a co-packer and have someone make it for you? Or are you going to have to build out a whole manufacturing facility to make this product? Those are other questions you'll have to answer as you determine where your product fits in.
Yeah, so lots of different considerations kind of swirling around at the beginning of the process. Maybe we can focus this in by thinking more specifically on maple syrup and kind of lining up some steps in the process to clarify this for our listeners. So let's think about maple syrup. It's a specialized industry, and it has, I think, some characteristics that make it a little unique compared to a lot of other commodities, because maple enterprises are usually small, family-owned businesses with limited resources. So if we put ourselves in the shoes of a small sugar maker who has the desire to start a small business with a new product, thinking more linearly, what would some of the steps be in that scenario?
Yeah, so maple is unique in some ways, but in some ways, those things you described are not necessarily unique just to maple. Like we do work with a lot of small scale farms that want to produce a sauce or some dried peppers, or there are other products that are similar that they're going to just sell on their farm stand or through a farmer's market, but on a small scale. And I think there's a relatively low bar to entry at a small scale for food products. You know, you have to get your scheduled process. You have to figure out what your facility is, and it's got to, be something that can pass inspection. So there will be someone who comes out and inspects your facility. So it's got to be clean. You've got to have a plan for how you're going to clean it and how you're going to make your product. You have to have the licenses to make it. But those aren't, for most products, are not too high of a bar if you're going small scale. If you want to produce something on a larger scale, that's when things get more difficult, because that's when you have to either find a co-packer or build out a manufacturing facility, which is not a cheap endeavor.
Right.
Yeah.
So going back to the example of the maple snacks, say I'm a small time sugar maker. I make a couple thousand gallons of maple syrup per year, and I want to branch out. And I have this idea that I want to make a snack food. And I come to you and say, I have this idea. I want to make a snack food to manufacture and sell. Step one, it sounds like you're going to send me back with homework to come up with some product concepts.
Yep.
And what resources would you point me to then as I get started with that? Should I reach out to the Food Venture Center? I mean, of course, there's a little bit of groundwork I'd have to do myself, right? I need to come up with, let's say I come up with a maple pretzel, but I'm not sure how to make it shelf stable or what packaging to use. Some of those questions, are those questions I could bring back to you or other resources at AgriTech?
Yeah. So you say you have a concept, but you don't have a prototype yet, and you want to make a maple pretzel. So I would, have a talk with you about that. And I would encourage you to look online on how to make pretzels and come up with a starting point, a prototype for what this maple pretzel looks like. And then you can work with that and make it taste how you want. There's other ways to do that. I mean, you could say, I want to make a maple pretzel. We have connections with companies that can start from that spot and say, okay, here's an array of maple pretzels that we've made that you can decide which one is the one you want to make. They can put together recipes for you, but that is not cheap.
Mm-hmm.
The Food Venture Center can help with product development, but they need a starting point. So that's why I say go online, figure out how people make pretzels and make a maple pretzel, and then bring it to the Food Venture Center. And they can help you figure out what's your shelf life. Is this shelf stable? And they can help you adjust your process to make sure it's food safe. And they might have some suggestions to make a certain flavor if you're looking for that. but they can't develop a product out of nothing very easily because that's not how it's set up. But there are companies that can do that. It's just expensive.
So the primary onus of developing at least the initial recipe and production process would fall on me as the entrepreneur, but then I could take that recipe to the Food Venture Center and they would offer refinements that could help improve the product.
Yes, that's the most cost-effective way to go. If you've got $100,000 to develop a product, then there are other pathways you could take.
Hire a food scientist, right? Or a firm, right?
Yeah.
So in order to initiate that process with the Food Venture Center, I would have to submit a sample and scheduled process application, right?
Yeah, that's the best way to get started with them. You can have a conversation with them before that, and we can help to set that up. We do have one member of our staff who also works for the Food Venture Center, so we can set up a meeting with him, Bruno, and he can talk to you. The Food Venture Center also has other people that will have an initial conversation with you to describe the process. Their website has some links that give you a pretty good idea of the steps to work with them.
Yeah, and I can say from our experience at the Maple program, we have worked with them on a number of products. So the staff there is familiar with Maple, which is, I think, helpful.
Yeah. And for Maple, I think with the Cornell Maple program, the Food Venture Center has developed a few products that are not being used commercially right now, right? So there are some available. If you're interested in taking one of these products and making it, you can.
Yeah, those were done in collaboration with us, and all that guidance is on our website, cornellmaple.com. So yeah, a very useful resource that was developed in collaboration with the Food Venture Center. Moving along in the process, let's say I've come up with my maple pretzel recipe and I think it tastes good. What should I do next?
Well, so I guess you have to figure out packaging, and I guess you would have to check about shelf stability. And I would think that a maple pretzel, depending on how you make it, it may not have food safety implications for its shelf life. So the shelf life could just be you taking it and leaving it somewhere for a few weeks, or taking a number of them and leaving one for 1 week and leaving one for 2 weeks and leaving one for 3 weeks, and then tasting them at those times to make sure it still tastes how you want it to taste.
Just a standard shelf life study then?
That you could do yourself, yeah. Mm-hmm. If it's a product that, because usually baked products from a safety perspective are pretty easy. If it's a product where there could be more microbial things going on, then we do have a microbiology lab that's in the same building as us, and they can do a microbial shelf life study to say this is food safe, this is shelf stable and safe to eat after 1 month or 2 months or 3 months. They can do that kind of a study if that's a concern.
So they would analyze it for bacteria and mold and that type of thing?
Yes.
Okay. What if I wanted to do further market testing? Are there resources for sensory analysis or market tests that you could recommend?
There are. Cornell does sensory analysis. It's possible to do it here at Geneva, but most of that is done in Ithaca. And there are private companies that do that in the area too, and we can refer you to one of them.
Okay.
Yeah. Or you can do an informal version of that on your own too.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the companies we work with do it more informally, not as part of a sensory study.
More of just a blind taste test instead of like an official triangle test.
Yeah, a great place to do that kind of thing is something like a farmer's market. That's a great place for once you have a product, especially one of the larger farmers markets like the regional market in Syracuse, or I think there's another one in Rochester that's similar. There's a lot of people at those places, and you can sell your products and give out samples, and they will give you feedback right there about what they think of it. So those are really good places for starting food products to get feedback from potential customers.
Those are great suggestions for some of our new product development work at Cornell. We've taken samples to the New York State Fair, and we're able to very quickly get hundreds of people to taste test, and that gave a lot of data for us to look at. So it was really helpful. One of the stumbling blocks that we've encountered trying to facilitate this process beyond creating the product and the packaging and the shelf stability is co-packing. For a lot of products, co-packing is just the way to go. So for example, we developed a sports gel, which would have to be packaged on a large scale, requires some specialized equipment. And we had a hard time finding co-packers. Are those types of business solutions something that you're able to assist with?
Yeah, we try, but you're right. It's hard to make that match. There's a lot of companies out there that make food products, and a lot of them can co-pack. But to find the right match is often a challenge. And we do that. So you can come to us and say, here's what I'm looking for in a co-packer. And we can reach out to the resources we have and the people that we know in the industry and try to make that match. But it's not always a straightforward process. So yes, we try to do that. And we can give you places to start.
Yeah, some of the challenges there, and maybe you have some to add, are minimum run sizes, because when we were trying to get a maple soda co-packed, the minimum run size most places is at least 100,000 units. And we were looking for maybe 1 or 2,000. So that was a challenge. And then also the setup between batches. There was quite a fee charged to set up the equipment every time they did a processing run. Are there other issues with co-packing that need to be considered?
Well, yes, but that one, the first one you mentioned, the minimum run size is probably the biggest. There are some small co-packers around that can make, maybe 1,000. And then there's ones that make 100,000. And there's not a lot in the middle. We call that the Death Valley of co-packing. It's really hard to find ones in the middle. But there are a few out there. And the other problem is that if your product needs specialized equipment, you might have a co-packer that can do almost everything that you need them to do, but there's just one piece of equipment that they don't have. Some companies will buy that piece of equipment and just have it at the co-packer and have the co-packer use it. But that's not always easy for a startup company to be able to afford that piece of equipment.
Yeah, so I guess that's a real challenge then, and that's a caveat to this whole discussion, that it is easy to launch a new product, but you might end up in the death valley of co-packing depending on the type of product, and just to be aware of that. Yeah, that's good to know. Moving beyond the specifics in product development, just thinking more broadly about the business climate in New York, are there things going on, trends in, consumer trends or things like that are favorable to maple products that you can put your finger on for our listeners?
Yeah, I think there are. I think local artisan products are in demand right now. There's a lot of people who are looking for those products. I don't know if any of your listeners have been to one of the Taste New York stores, but New York State has a number of stores out there that exclusively sell New York State made products. So both from a consumer perspective and from a New York State perspective, there is interest in eating local products. And maple's also sustainable, right? You're getting sap out of a tree. People like that. Another thing about maple is it's unique. You can't produce maple syrup outside of the northeastern part of North America. They don't have maple in other places. And I think that uniqueness kind of is a great niche for the maple market.
Yeah, and that would point to a lot of markets that aren't currently being accessed by maple producers, perhaps, like overseas especially. Is that something that the Center of Excellence has facilitated at all, opening overseas markets?
Yeah, we do help with that sometimes. New York State has a great program called Global New York, where they help New York State companies to export to other parts of the world. And so what we usually would do if we had a product like that is help connect them with this Global New York program.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I can imagine there's a lot of market opportunity in high population countries like India, China, places like that, where probably there's no maple anywhere on the market.
Yeah.
I think I just gave away one of my best ideas. No, I know others have thought of that, but it's a tough nut to crack, perhaps for small maple businesses that aren't familiar with that. But sounds like it's attainable to open these overseas markets.
Yeah, I think so. There are resources available to help get into some of those markets.
Interesting. Okay. I think I framed that last question as the New York business climate, but does the Center of Excellence work with businesses outside of New York State?
Well, we do. Usually the businesses we work with outside of New York State, since we're funded by New York State, are businesses that are considering relocating to New York State, or at least starting some sort of operation in New York State. So they don't have to relocate their whole business, but if they're starting business operations in New York State, then we will work with them.
Okay, and so there's no extra fee that can be paid by entities from outside of New York State?
No, not for the Center of Excellence. Because we are funded by New York State, our services are all free. The Food Venture Center charges sort of on a cost basis. They charge what it costs them to do the service. And so they don't care where you are. So anybody can use the services of the Food Venture Center.
Okay. Well, that's really helpful to know for folks that are in Vermont or New Hampshire. Are they out of luck, or do you know of similar programs to the Center of Excellence in other states?
I don't know. I'm not sure what they have in other states.
Yeah, I get the sense that New York is a little bit special in the resources that we have for developing new food products here. So maybe other states will catch up at some point, but for now, we'll just have to carry the banner, and that's good for us here in New York. But
yeah, it is. But for the food safety stuff and some of that stuff that the Food Venture Center does, that's accessible by people from Vermont and in New Hampshire and wherever else.
Yeah, so they can ride our coattails a little bit.
Yeah.
Great. So if someone wants to get started with this process, what's the best way to reach out to the Center of Excellence and get started?
Well, there's a link on our website that you can send us an inquiry, ask for help, or you can email me at dcs285@cornell.edu. And our website URL is too long and complicated to bother with here. But if you just Google Center of Excellence, Cornell, Geneva, it'll come up.
And I think there's a prominent link on the Cornell AgriTech homepage as well, right?
Yes.
So folks can surf over there and quickly find contact information to get in touch with the Center of Excellence.
Yep.
Well, that's a lot of great information, Derek. Is there anything else that I've overlooked that's important that you'd like to share?
The only other thing that I'd like to share is that we have a summer scholars program. Our first year was last year. And this year, I think we're going to focus on maple products. It's not very well defined yet because it's not till the summer, but we're going to focus in on maple. So if you know of anybody who's an undergrad at any college or university who might be interested in working on maple products as an internship over the summer, let us know. And when we have a description and an application, we'll get it out to you.
Oh, that's really exciting. Do you know how many students you're going to accept into the program?
Last year we had 2, and I think it will be the same.
Oh, so it could be competitive.
It could be. We'll see.
Yeah, what a great opportunity. I'll certainly advertise that amongst the maple crowd.
Yeah. That'll be great.
All right. Well, thanks so much for your time today, Derek. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Aaron. It was great.
So in listening to this episode, one of the things that strikes me is all the nuances of product development. And that's something that, struck us at the very beginning of this project. It's one of the reasons we've taken on this research is that product development is complicated. But what Derek is highlighting here is that there are a lot of resources to navigate that complexity and successfully get a product from an idea to the marketplace. Did you have that same impression, Adam?
Yeah, I did. As a sugar maker, we like working in the woods and being in the sugar house, making syrup. But when it comes to that new product development, that's a lot of times kind of uncharted territory that we're not familiar with, and we don't know what the resources that are available out there. So it can be a little bit daunting to think about, I've got this idea, but how do I actually get to that finished product that follows all the legal requirements to make a food safe, shelf stable product?
Yeah, one of the things that is confusing to me, or was initially, is that there are so many different concerns that need to be addressed to bring a product to market. But what I've found is helpful is breaking them up into categories. And then you quickly find that there are resources to deal with each of those categories. So what I mean by that is first there's like a technical food science category. You have to develop a product that tastes good and it's shelf stable and it's safe to produce. But there are resources for that. And in this instance, Derek referred to the Cornell Food Venture Center, which is our process authority in New York State, and they also help with product formulation. And then you can look at the regulatory requirements and the business solutions, and we have the Center of Excellence to help with that. So once you kind of get it all laid out in front of you in a linear pathway, all the things you need to do to bring a product to market, then you can start chunking it out and tackling one task at a time.
Yeah, that's great advice, Aaron. And I think it's encouraging to know that there's help out there. But I think also important to mention that we have our food scientist in the Cornell Maple program, Dr. Catherine Belisle, who can help walk through some of that regulatory to kind of point folks in the direction of where they need to go.
Yeah, that's true. We have our own in-house resources, and folks are, of course, welcome to reach out to us directly at the Cornell Maple program. Part of the bigger picture here is broadening our thinking about maple. And I've said this before, but a lot of us identify ourselves as maple syrup producers or sugar makers. But really, most fundamentally, we are tree sap farmers. And that sap is a really versatile product that can be turned into a whole wide variety of things. But to break into some of those new product sectors like alcoholic beverages or sports supplements, there really are a lot of technical hurdles to cross. So that's where this piece of the puzzle comes into play. If we can figure out how to navigate those challenges, then all of a sudden tree sap farming can become a lot more lucrative because we can sell our products in more marketplaces.
Yeah, I think it's great to be able to open up those opportunities to market maple to new avenues. And in your interview with Derek, you had mentioned, that the Center for Excellence is funded through New York State. And so it's for companies and operations that are located within New York. And so, you had talked a little bit about folks who are outside the state that can use the Food Venture Center resources, but the Center for Excellence might be a little bit more limited. So are there other ideas that you have for folks who may not be in New York who are kind of looking for new product development? Where should they go to go through all those steps and those hurdles to take a new product to market?
Well, I guess there are two different pathways. And if going with public resources, if that's the option you want to pursue, different states have different resources. It's highly variable. And to find those resources, a good starting point would be your extension agency. So whether it's a county-based extension or a university-based extension system, reach out to the extension system and see what resources they have available. There may also be university-based programs that aren't affiliated with extension in your state, so that would be worth investigating. A good starting point for that would be reaching out to your state land grant institution. Another venue would be simply to go with private companies. There are private companies that do provide a lot of these services, and that's a wild goose chase sometimes, but if you get on Google, you might be able to track down some resources for hire that can help with different aspects of product development.
I think there's one more opportunity you didn't mention, Aaron, and that's that they can just move to New York.
Yeah, New York is a great place to do business for all the reasons we mentioned, and there are a lot of maple trees for those who are interested. We will continue this work at the Cornell Maple Program, and if you're interested in our work, surf over to our website, cornellmaple.com, and click on the New Product Development tab at the top of the page.
Sounds great, Aaron. I look forward to hearing more about the new product development that you're doing down at the Arnott Forest.
So we'll try to bring some of that to future episodes. Thanks for listening to Sweet Talk All Things Maple with Adam and Aaron.
Thank you for joining us for Sweet Talk, All Things Maple with Aaron and Adam. Sweet Talk is produced by the Cornell Maple Program and is made possible from funding from the USDA National Institute of Food and Agriculture. All music was obtained from Blue Dot Sessions. For more information on all things maple, visit cornellmaple.com. Join us next time for more Maple Sweet Talk. Have a sweet day.